What if the reason your joints still hurt, despite the supplements, despite everything you've been told to avoid, isn't about one missing food, but about the pattern of your entire week? That's what the research keeps pointing to. Not a superfood, not a pill, a consistent eating pattern, repeated across 7 days, that measurably changes what's happening in your joints. So today, I want to give you exactly that, a practical weekly framework built around what the evidence actually shows for joint pain after 60. Here's how we're going to do this. First, I'm going to explain what's actually happening inside your joints when you eat an anti-inflammatory pattern consistently, because once you understand the mechanism, the food choices stop feeling arbitrary. Then we'll go through the anchor foods, the ones that show up most reliably in the research specifically for joint pain, not just inflammation in general. After that, I'll show you how to structure your week so this becomes a rhythm rather than a project, and I'll flag the few things most people are still eating that are quietly working against everything else. Let's get into it. The joint is a sealed environment: cartilage, synovial fluid, the membrane surrounding it, essentially a closed system. And what happens inside that system is directly influenced by what's circulating in your bloodstream, which means what you eat gets in there. Here's what chronic inflammation is actually doing to that environment. Your immune system produces proteins as part of its inflammatory response, and one of them, when chronically elevated, has one specific job: signaling the cartilage in your joints to break down. When these compounds are running high consistently, which they tend to be in people eating a pro-inflammatory diet after 60, you're running a slow, continuous degradation process every day. Not dramatic, not painful in the moment, just quiet, cumulative damage. Actually, I don't want to get too far into the biochemistry because the mechanism that matters is simpler than the name suggests. The point is this: there are measurable compounds in your blood that are actively breaking down joint tissue, and what you eat directly controls their levels. That's the part most people haven't been told. This was demonstrated in a randomized controlled trial: 99 patients with osteoarthritis, 16 weeks on a Mediterranean-style diet. At the end of it, researchers measured the inflammatory proteins in their blood. They had dropped significantly. And with them, the measurable signs of cartilage breakdown had improved, and knee and hip mobility scores had followed. 16 weeks of a different eating pattern changed what was happening at the tissue level, not just on a pain scale, in the structural markers of joint health. That's what's actually happening inside your joints. Not eat better and feel better. Diet changes the biochemical environment inside your joints. And it does it on a timeline measurable in weeks. So why does the weekly pattern matter, as opposed to just knowing which foods are good? Because joints don't respond to occasional interventions. They respond to sustained input. Eating oily fish once doesn't shift your inflammatory markers. Eating it consistently, around twice a week, every week, is what a 5-year study of older adults found associated with a 30% reduction in the odds of pain worsening. Not pain elimination, a 30% lower chance that your pain gets worse over time, from one dietary habit repeated at the right frequency. That's the key insight. The regularity is the intervention. This is also why most people don't see results from what they've already tried. They add a food, they cut something out. They do it for a couple of weeks, don't feel dramatically different, and stop. What the research is actually describing is a shift in the average week, repeated consistently, that changes the trajectory of joint pain over time. So let's build that week. Oily fish, twice a week, and start here. Not because it's the most glamorous food on this list, but because the evidence for oily fish and joint pain is more specific and consistent than almost anything else in the research. The Seniors Enrica 1 study, the one behind that 30% figure from Part 2, was specific about something important. The effect wasn't from total fish consumption. It was from oily fish: salmon, mackerel, sardines, herring, anchovies, the kind with the fat still in it, because that's where the omega-3s are. White fish, fish sticks, canned tuna in water didn't show the same result. It was the variety and the frequency that mattered, and there's a reason for that specificity. Oily fish delivers EPA and DHA, the two forms of omega-3 your body can use directly in the inflammatory process. Unlike the omega-3 in flaxseed or walnuts, which your body has to convert first, and does so less efficiently after 60, EPA and DHA from fish go to work directly on the inflammatory pathways driving joint damage. A meta-analysis of 9 clinical trials involving over 2,000 osteoarthritis patients confirmed that omega-3 supplementation significantly reduced arthritis pain and improved joint function compared to placebo. But what the whole food data adds is that getting it from the fish itself as part of a consistent weekly pattern produces effects that accumulate across months and years. Supplements can help. The fish is the target, twice a week. That's the frequency the research maps to. Not every day, twice a week, consistently. Extra virgin olive oil, daily. It works differently from the fish. The fish delivers a concentrated dose of a specific anti-inflammatory compound on the days you eat it. Olive oil works through a different mechanism, and it works every single day. Extra virgin olive oil contains a compound called oleocanthal. Researchers have found that oleocanthal inhibits the same inflammatory enzyme as ibuprofen, not at the same strength, but through the same pathway. And it does this alongside a range of plant compounds that protect joint tissue from oxidative damage rather than just suppressing the signal. The extra virgin distinction matters more than most people realize. Refined olive oil and light olive oil have been processed in ways that strip out most of these compounds. Extra virgin is cold-pressed and minimally handled. That's what preserves the oleocanthal and the plant compounds that make it work. The label isn't marketing. It's the difference between the active version and the inert one. 2 to 3 tablespoons daily is the functional dose used in Mediterranean diet research. But this isn't a supplement situation. It's just the oil you cook with, the dressing base you use, the thing you drizzle on roasted vegetables. It replaces other oils. It becomes structural to the week rather than something you add on top. Colorful vegetables, daily and varied. This is where most people underdeliver, not because they're avoiding vegetables, but because they're eating the same 2 or 3. And the research on joint pain is clear that variety across colors is doing meaningful work. Different colors represent different families of anti-inflammatory compounds working through different pathways, and that's not a marketing concept, it's how the chemistry actually works. The deep purple in blueberries and cherries is doing something the dark green in spinach and kale isn't. The orange in sweet potato works through different mechanisms than the compounds in broccoli and cauliflower that research suggests may slow cartilage breakdown at the cellular level. You need the range, not just more of the same color you already eat. Let me break this down practically. Berries are the standout for joint pain specifically. Blueberries, tart cherries, and pomegranate have the most consistent evidence for reducing the inflammatory markers most directly tied to arthritis. Dark leafy greens add something different. Vitamin K and magnesium, both directly involved in cartilage and bone health. Broccoli and cauliflower bring their own protective plant compounds. Research suggests they may slow cartilage breakdown at the cellular level, and tomatoes and red peppers round it out with vitamin C and antioxidants that reduce oxidative damage in joint tissue. This is where things start to click, because look at what these foods have in common. They can all be part of an ordinary day without any dramatic effort. Blueberries with breakfast, spinach and eggs, broccoli as a side, a handful of cherries in the afternoon. These aren't interventions. They're just what the week looks like when it's built with intention. Legumes, 3 to 4 times a week. This one doesn't get nearly enough attention in the joint pain conversation. Lentils, chickpeas, black beans, kidney beans, edamame. Legumes are among the most fiber-dense foods you can eat, and fiber directly lowers circulating inflammatory markers. Not through weight management alone, directly. Here's the mechanism. Your gut bacteria ferment dietary fiber and produce short-chain fatty acids, compounds that act as anti-inflammatory agents and circulate into the bloodstream, including into joint tissue. A gut fed consistently with adequate fiber is actively producing anti-inflammatory output every day. This is why a bowl of lentil soup on Tuesday is doing something at your knee by Wednesday. 3 to 4 times a week is achievable without overhauling anything. Hummus as a snack, lentils in a soup, black beans in a grain bowl, edamame as a side. The barrier is usually just habit, not effort. Walnuts and mixed tree nuts, a small daily handful. They're one of the few plant sources that deliver meaningful amounts of plant-based omega-3, and they also bring vitamin E and plant compounds that reduce oxidative stress in joint tissue through separate pathways. Now, let me be precise about this, because I don't want it to land as eat a bag of nuts and your joints will stop hurting. The dose in most research is roughly an ounce per day, about 14 walnut halves, or a small mixed handful of walnuts and almonds. Plain nuts, not trail mix with dried fruit and yogurt chips mixed in. The benefit is in the nut itself, not the packaging it comes surrounded by. The daily habit matters here because the effect is cumulative. A small consistent dose daily is more meaningful than a large occasional one. Same principle as the fish, turmeric, consistently, not occasionally. Here's the thing, curcumin, the active compound in turmeric, has some of the clearest mechanistic evidence in the joint pain literature. But the way most people use it isn't actually delivering meaningful amounts. Curcumin is poorly absorbed on its own. What activates it is piperine, the compound in black pepper. Research on curcumin consistently pairs it with black pepper, because without piperine, absorption is minimal. A golden latte with turmeric and no black pepper is delivering a fraction of the potential. Same for turmeric supplements that don't list piperine on the label. The practical version is simple. A teaspoon of turmeric with a generous pinch of black pepper added to cooking, soups, roasted vegetables, scrambled eggs, stir-fries, 3 or 4 times across the week. It becomes a seasoning habit rather than a supplement protocol. That's the version that works, what's quietly undermining the rest of it. And this connects to the last thing I flagged in the roadmap, the few things that most people are still doing that cancel out a significant portion of what the anchor foods are building. The most consistent one is refined vegetable oils, corn oil, soybean oil, generic vegetable oil. These are extremely high in omega-6 fatty acids. At the ratios most people consume them, combined with the omega-3 intake the average person gets, they tip the inflammatory balance in the wrong direction. You can eat salmon twice a week and roast vegetables in olive oil on Sunday, then cook 3 other meals in corn oil and substantially cancel the benefit. The joint's inflammatory environment responds to the ratio across the whole week, not to the best meal of the week. The second is inconsistency across weeks, which leads to the next thing, because this is where the long-term data is actually instructive. Researchers from the Osteoarthritis Initiative followed over 4,300 people for 4 years and tracked their dietary patterns alongside knee OA outcomes. The people with the highest adherence to a Mediterranean-style pattern had a 9% lower risk of symptomatic knee OA compared to those with the lowest. That's not a dramatic number on its own, but look at what it required. Sustained consistency over 4 years, not a dietary intervention for a month. The trajectory of joint pain over time responds to what the average week looks like across years, not to the best week. That's the through line for this entire plan. The foods matter. The frequency matters. The week-over-week consistency is what turns it from a health experiment into an actual change in how your joints feel. Here's the shape of the week. Oily fish twice, salmon on Tuesday, sardines or mackerel on Friday. Extra virgin olive oil every day in cooking and dressings. Colorful vegetables varied on the plate daily. Legumes 3 to 4 times. Hummus Monday. Lentil soup Wednesday. Black beans in a grain bowl Thursday. A small handful of walnuts or mixed tree nuts daily. Turmeric with black pepper into the cooking 3 or 4 times across the week. And the refined vegetable oils are gone. Replaced by olive oil or avocado oil when you need higher heat. That's it. That's the week. It's not a therapeutic protocol. It doesn't require specialty stores or unusual ingredients. It's a different version of an ordinary week, where the anchor foods are consistent, the problematic oils are replaced, and the pattern holds Monday to Sunday, rather than just on the days when you're being careful. And what about timeline? When does something actually shift? Biomarkers tied to joint inflammation begin moving within 4 to 6 weeks of a sustained dietary change. Pain and mobility scores in clinical trials typically show meaningful improvement at the 8 to 12-week mark, not overnight. A gradual shift in the baseline, less stiffness on waking, less of that initial bracing before you stand up, more of the day where the joint isn't the loudest thing in the room. Some people notice it sooner. The trajectory in the data is consistent, sustained pattern, measurable change, within weeks, not years. Now here's where it gets real. And I want to be direct about this because I think it usually gets softened when it shouldn't be. Joint pain after 60 has a direction. Left unmanaged, it doesn't plateau. And what starts as something you can walk off in 20 minutes has a way of quietly narrowing your world. Think about what that looks like 5 years from now. Someone who used to walk 18 holes on a Saturday morning, who used to stand in the kitchen for 2 hours on a Sunday, cooking for the whole family, who used to take the stairs without deciding to take the stairs, and now they're planning their day around their knees, taking the elevator, sitting out the walk, letting someone else do the cooking because the hour on their feet is too much, not because of surgery, not because of one bad moment, because the week never changed and the damage kept adding up quietly while they waited for it to get bad enough to really address. I've worked with people at that point, and what they almost always ask is, if I change what I eat now, does it actually help? The answer is yes. The research is clear. Diet changes the biochemical environment inside the joint. It slows the process. At 60, at 65, at 70, the window isn't closed, but it requires the week to actually change, not the intention, the week. So here's what I want you to do with this. Pick 2 things from this plan that feel within reach, and do them this week. If you're not eating oily fish twice a week, start there. Buy the salmon. Put it on Tuesday and Friday. That one habit has the most specific and consistent evidence for joint pain in older adults of anything on this list. If your cooking oil is still vegetable or corn oil, swap it this weekend. 1 bottle of extra virgin olive oil. Use it for everything from here. 1 purchase, 1 shift, working every single day. Add the berries at breakfast, the walnuts at lunch, turmeric and black pepper into dinner. By next week, you have the pattern. By week 8, the research says your inflammatory markers are moving. By week 12, pay attention to your mornings, how long it takes to get going. How much of the day the joints are the thing you're most aware of. That's the measure, not a scale, not a blood panel. Your mornings in 12 weeks. Subscribe if you want to keep building on this. I cover the research on joint health and anti-inflammatory eating every week without the noise. I'll see you there.